the pediatric. Oh, thank you. Welcome everyone to the second session that we've got with the wonderful Amy Hogan to the Neurodevelopmental Clinical Network Lunch and Learn program. You just put the slide over, Katie, that'd be great. Can you progress the slide, Katie? Thank you. Just as a little reminder that the Paediatric Society, it's an organisation of health professionals, not just paediatricians, and we welcome, and we're all working together to progress the health and wellbeing of children in Tamariki and Rangatahi through Aotearoa, New Zealand. As the Lunch and Learn is one thing that the Paediatric Society offers, but there's also lots of other special interest groups and resources and education grants available to members, and also, supporting the project development. So please come join us there. We're love to have new members. Thank you, Katie. And today, as I said, we're welcoming Amy Hogan back again. She did a wonderful presentation for us last month, following on from her research that she had done on critical perspectives on chronic illness and cure narratives and insights for allied health professionals. And at the end of last month, she posed 3 questions to us. What language you use when discussing therapy goals? How can we change our language from deficit-based to capacity-based language? And how can we help create space for chronicity in our work? And these are great questions, and we can stop sharing that slide now because Amy's going above and beyond, and they've another little slideshow for us today, sharing resources and ideas. And what we're hoping to do is that Amy is going to post some questions to us in the discussion, and we really would like you, when she asks us questions, to post your answers in the chat, and then people can be listening to that resource of the chat, and this discussion will be available on the website and the Paediatric Society website, and hopefully there will also be an opportunity for ongoing discussion about how we can use Amy's knowledge in our work with other children and their whānau. So if you would like to take it away, I'll be quiet now. Thank you, Amy.
Sure. Can everybody see that okay?
Yes, that's perfect. Perfect.
I'm going to do a brief run through because I want the main thing for this to be is around the discussion. So fundamentally, we are talking about the desire for direct intervention. I can't tell you how many families have come to me asking for what is the most direct intervention for cerebral palsy, but also other conditions. So what I like to call this is the fix-it urge. And for me, this is largely a developmental stage that a lot of families and their whānau go through. It's entirely natural to go through a fix-it phase. I mean, my niece and nephew went through a phase of thinking that they could fix my legs like Bob the Builder. And so the need to fix it is entirely natural, but the problem stems from when this becomes completely all immersive and all engaging and everything that the family think about. So I've done a hypothetical case study. I don't typically like the term case study, but this is a completely made up one. So what kind of things would you think about if somebody came and asking you for a cure? Can you maybe put some ideas in the chat? I'll give you 1 minute. as I spoke about last time, there is a place for the curative idea and the urge to fix it. But it's this notion that being entirely healthy needs to reign supreme. And this idea of challenging healthism. And because I love New Zealand models and I love championing New Zealand models at every opportunity, I drew a comparison and a metaphor to Mason Joy's work, which is Te Whare Tawhawha and the house model of health. And but in my mind, can we use this model when we approach therapy and the idea of rethinking intervention? Can we produce a health model, a, a house model when it comes to therapy? So the idea of what are the foundations of therapy? Everybody is going everybody is going to talk to you about we want to do everything for our child, we want to do everything for our teenager. But in the sense, what are the foundations that they need in their everyday life? And I've done a version of this for myself as an adult looking back on my life as somebody with CP. And for me, my foundations that I would have brought through therapy and would have brought through all the interventions that I had. I was a child of the 80s and the 90s, so very much there was a lot of focus on orthopedic interventions, and two of my amazing physios are in the room who got me to where I am today. Um, but for me, the foundations would have been this. Had I had the chance to go back and look at it, how can I address pain and discomfort? Moving, moving as in literally getting from A to B, not necessarily walking, but how do I move? How do I keep my internal system settled, particularly around things like digestion and eating and drinking, and also notions of stamina. So the carrying on to the house model of foundational support. Everybody says there's no therapy in my region. I see the physio once a month. But what do the actual foundations look like in the regions where they are? What are the practical supports that may be in place? What are the protective factors around resilience? And what are the adaptations to support? Okay, I don't know if anybody has any particular drawing skills, but if you could, on a bit of paper, or even in your head, or even in on a note app on your phone, can you consider the ideas of how would you build a therapy house or an intervention house? Looking at, we all know that within these constraints of the public health system in general, but also the constraints of everyday therapy. How do we work to build sustainability in therapy and sustainability for all our tamariki and murataki around the country, particularly if they are feeling like they're under-therapized or over-therapized? And I'm aware that therapized isn't a word, but I am claiming it for now. So if you could just have an idea around building a sense of the therapy house.
I just want to say something, Amy, that I
Hello.
think of, hi, I was just thinking that you're saying about a therapy house, and I was wondering whether it's a therapy street. And there's multiple houses, and should we be spending more or as much attention on building the paths and the roads between the different houses rather than only just focusing on one little house
Yes,
where you're isolating the problem to the child and that one family.
but
And
absolutely, because you will be a part of a relay system for that family. So they'll come to you for a little bit and then they'll go to the next house. It is a therapy street. And particularly for something like CP, but with a lot of the other conditions as well, there's that sense of that they're resource and therapy intensive conditions. So how do we build the infrastructure around therapy? The reason I touched the metaphor of the house is the idea of we can't give everything to everybody. And that's a part of the reason why so many people are reaching out to private providers, spending gazillions of dollars of intensives. But do we know what the families therapy foundation can be and what the therapy foundations that you yourself can deliver or the service that you live with can deliver? And that's the point around sustainability. Sorry, Jane, did I interrupt your last point? I realized.
No, you didn't interrupt. I was just, I guess I was thinking back to Te Whare Te Whawha, and
Yep.
I think many of us in the health sector, we try and embed, or in pediatrics, the F words and Te Whare Te Whawha within to the New Zealand context, the cultural, how you try and marry the two concepts together. We think about that, and I really love that, and that feels Te Te Whawha and a house and the F words are kind of where I feel I sit. But I think the question is like, then how do I implement it, and what's my role in supporting it? And again, if I think about what you're saying, uh, like I'm not saying the right word, but the disability mindset. As a therapist, do I think I'm building the house, or are the parents building the house, and I'm one of the builders that they bring in that has the skills to do the, I don't know, like the plumbing. I mean, maybe I'm the plumber. I don't know.
For me, I think the biggest thing that therapists offer and can offer is a realistic sense of what's available in the region and what this is going to build on. Because you see, fundamentally, if I go back to, although it's not letting me go back for whatever reason, if I go back to what I want as my therapy foundation, so when I talk about the pain and the getting from A to B and the similar things, it's not about the therapy goals, because I'm always the suspect of the word goals because it's too well-being like. It's more a matter of what are the foundations that these families are trying to access, and how do they construct the idea of disability? Because part of the reason why people go to the cure narrative and the idea of I do everything to cure this condition is because they don't have the tools to see an alternative where their kid can live with both and. So the both a condition and both be fine and thrive with the conditions. So I want to help build a sense of how we sit with the constraints of therapy as they are now, not necessarily building a palace that all kids can live in, but the foundations. Can we build a foundation of therapy that is solid and relatively strong, rather than people projecting everything onto hypothetical stem cell treatments in Mexico? Okay. And last time I spoke to you guys about the idea of freezing. So ca ca a lot of the people that I talk to and I work with in my work, they come to me with they're doing so many things privately, they're accessing so many things, but there's also a lot of families that are like, oh my God, I wish I could access XYZ. I wish I could do this. I wish I could do that. And they feel incredibly guilty. So I introduced the idea of freezing to to plant the seed or the idea that sometimes breathing and looking at what we're actually doing and why we're doing it can be quite a useful exercise. And
Amy,
just say,
Amy, can I just
yeah,
ask, freezing, you mean as the family, we as therapists are freezing, or are
um,
we, is it's something that we are
we're,
supporting the
yeah,
family to
yeah,
freeze as in
yeah,
whole?
you're doing both, I think. I think the family and the therapy team are sort of freezing, even if it's just like the first 20 minutes of a meeting or something, and just saying, look, what are all the things this family is engaging in? What I, are they spending a tremendous amount of time doing XYZ? Are there ways to simplify it? All that kind of stuff. It's like, because sometimes you go through the same therapy routines for months, years, and there's not sometimes a free to say, what are we actually doing? Um, and
So
again,
like, so like a stock take.
yeah, exactly, a stock take, a therapy inventory, if you will.
And Amy, I think that's a really important point.
Yeah.
That's given me a clear memory of an interaction I had with a mum whose son had been hit by a car, so he had a TBI. And she arrived one day for her session and she said, I'm really sorry, Philippa. I haven't been able to do any of the home activities this last week because I've been too busy hating the man who knocked my son down. And I thought, thank goodness she was able to tell me that so clearly, because the last thing she needed that day was for me to give her a whole lot more things to do at
Mm,
home that she wasn't in the place to do it at all.
yes. And that's exactly what I mean. Like, because people, through no fault of their own, the fix-it paradigm occurs, right? So you get a child with a diagnosis, you have a child with a traumatic brain injury, your only instinct is to alleviate their suffering and take away as much of their suffering that you perceive as possible. So that is entirely within their rights, but we need to rebuild their idea that sometimes just breathing or floating with a fair amount of therapy can sometimes be the right thing to do. And this is again a hypothetical case study that I wanted to look at around the struggle and the expectations that come from mobility. So you're going to walk for your entire life, essentially. That was a lot of the dialogue that was around when I was younger. Thankfully, not by the therapists in this room, but there was a lot of internal dialogue and it was a bit of a nightmare. And these are some of the questions I posed here. How are they or their families understanding the idea of mobility? How are they framing it? What resources do they have? And what energy does it require? And what are the steps in play? So if you could maybe just have a little chat in the chat. Um,
You know what, Amy, I reckon we're doing well for time. It would be great if people put things in the chat. But if
yeah,
anybody feels like unmuting and
yes,
having a conversation here, like that's kind of the point of this session is like
yeah.
to
I'm
be
I'm not
actively.
I'm not that scary.
No, you know what I would be thinking when I look at this question
Yeah,
again, it's like, is it the child's expectation or is it the parents again, or the school or
mm,
the what? That's
yeah.
the question I have. I
And
don't
don't
know if
forget,
anyone else wants to unmute and say
and
something.
don't forget, it's really easy for those things to become intertwined, right?
Yeah, so easy.
Because
Mm.
parents, children don't often have an own sense of expectation. It's imprinted from their
Mm.
surroundings.
Can I
Well,
say, sorry, off you go, Philippa.
Amy, I hope you don't mind me using this. This is just another little anecdote.
Yeah.
Reading those things, um, I've had a wonderful flashback of doing a kindy visit with you when you were 4. So you were a very feisty young woman when you were 4.
I'd
And
agree.
we did a kindy visit from your kindy to the next door the neighbouring kindy, and you walked in with your 2 sticks, and there was a little fellow in the sandpit who looked up from the sandpit and said to you, "What have you got those things for?" And you said to him, "To walk with, of course, silly." And I thought I was thinking, what am I going to say? Well, I didn't have to say a word because at 4, Amy could speak for herself perfectly well.
Oh,
Mirren, you've got your hand raised. Please feel free to make a comment.
Kia ora, team. I guess, great questions that you've posed to us, Amy. And I guess I'm just thinking about, it's understandable families are wanting more. I guess I'm just thinking about what's the role of social media playing in terms of families seeing stuff online and then being inspired / influenced, encouraged to kind of keep seeking that alternative treatment or something that's maybe not locally available. In terms of back in the day when there wasn't that social media and were all these intensives available or like these extra treatments that people are paying a fortune?
And I think the biggest thing around that is this idea of the question I posed around making space for chronicity, because what those experimental treatments offer that our conventional treatments don't is a complete cure often. Like the kids will be able to walk and they'll be able to do a lot, and there's a different level of expectation, and that the role that allied health professionals play, I think, is building a scaffolding around. Yes, absolutely. If you want, you can go spend $200,000 on XYZ. Go for your life, freedom and choice, all that malarkey. But the principle of loving and embracing your child is not the same thing as doing absolutely everything humanly possible to eradicate their condition. They're not identical. And that's the messaging that social media gets wrong. You can love your child and be a low income family that cannot dream of fundraising for those big adventures overseas, or you can be one of those families that's in a privileged position to do that. And both of those scenarios are okay.
Absolutely.
Because you guys will have no luck convincing the parents and the families that are absolutely convinced that spending huge amounts of money on stem cells is the right way to go. They're going to do that if you talk to you blue in the face.
Yeah.
But I think there's a whole cohort of families that you can talk to who are seeing that stuff on social media and feeling incredibly guilty that they can't afford it.
Well, that's my worry. There's so much out there, and it's so great that people are sharing their stories and experiences. Like there's lots of value in that. But the downside of that is is the equitable barrier in terms of what's available or not.
And one of the biggest ones.
That was something that came to mind when thinking about allied health and how we support families on their journeys.
And
because often we're the ones that the questions come like, so what do you think about this? I saw this online. What do you think about that?
And what you think about it in the true sense of the term is that every family has the right to hope. Every family has the right to construct their idea around what hope may look like. But in your wider experience, taking the child completely out of their family systems and doing this again and again can put a lot of burden on families. So it's something that needs to be considered incredibly carefully. And that there will be the next bright and shiny thing that's around the corner. If these things resonate with people really strongly, then that's fine. But people just need to be aware that lots and lots of shiny things come up every few months or so. And that the more people are tied into their New Zealand roots and their therapy roots, the better, rather than, in my case, there were times when people were sneaking off to do experimental treatments and they're not telling the New Zealand therapists that this has been going on because they're too afraid of being told off, I suppose.
True. Great points. Thanks, Amy.
So again, this is sort of the floating and letting things settle idea around, again, the child and the disability are not the same. You can love the child and dose them up with chocolate and allow them to WAG therapy, and it's not the end of the world. And the sort of the language of lifetime and long-term approaches. Hi, Sarah?
Sarah, yeah, hi. I just wanted to say that this whole conversation resonates very strongly with me because I work in mainstream schools, and this is the
So you.
conversation that comes up all the time because we are trying to have a functional, focus of what are the strengths of the child and how do they be a student and do what students do in school. But there's always that sense of kind of never being good enough for families and sometimes schools because of their wanting to fix things, and even school people wanting to be therapeutic in a way that is not necessarily a realistic and day-to-day value to the student. So it's
And
a good
again,
conversation.
the idea of parental trauma is under recognized and under diagnosed as well. So that's part of the issue that we're contending with. And maybe part of the floating is looking at what structure could be put around the families as well to support their grief, because the family's grief is entirely different from the individual person's grief.
Can I ask, do
Yeah.
you think that, when because it's like that's another F word, like there's the freezing and the floating, do you think if people are having conversations about the F words, that this sort of freezing, floating is a way to have conversations? I mean, have you in your research had conversations with families that are in that tension of like absolutely wanting to do the
Yes.
best and feeling guilty? And do those words sort of resonate for them about, you can't be a perfect, like maybe social media? And I see Lindsay's written an amazing thing in the chat, Amy. I don't know if you can see the chat at the same
No,
time.
not at the moment.
Oh, so Lindsay, she's a mother who accesses social media. I feel that mainstream parenting influences are starting to show a shift of what a typical home and family actually looks like. Messy, sickness, cereal for dinner, etc. I just hope we start to see this shift in the disability parenting sector as well, to emphasize what you're saying. And I'm just wondering if these could be words that as clinicians that have listened to this talk could go away and start trying to maybe use in our conversations.
That's what I'm hoping for. And again, with this activity, I'm not expecting it to be done now, but it's that idea around what are the moments when people could potentially float or freeze or any of those kind of things. And how can it be applied to disability support? And again, these are just some questions and ideas to go away with. And I'm happy to come along for another talk if people think it would be useful. But it's that idea of introducing ideas, I suppose. And I will be sending updated slides to Jane and the team. And if anybody wants to get in touch with me, they know how. And most of you know me around anyway. So thank you very much.
Oh, Amy, amazing. I just wondered if anybody else here wants to post any questions before we finish today, because we are right on time. And Katie just needs to, thank you, Katie, share the last slide for today. We would love you to join our mailing list if you are not part of it. Our next session, Lunch and Learn session, is April the 8th, and we have Kat Harvey, who has been doing her research. She's an occupational therapist, and she's presenting her findings related to the process of learning between parents and occupational therapists who work with children, and the factors that influence that process, which actually sounds like it really marries up well about looking at the lens of a clinician working with together or alongside or partnering with families. So we would really love you to come and join us to Kat Harvey's presentation. But yes, if I think you can stop that slide now. Thank you, Katty. But if anyone's got any questions that they want to put here in the chat, we'll be sharing these with Amy. Oh, it looks like Amy's dropped out for some reason. But if you would like to put any questions in, then we'll be sharing the transcription of this with Amy. And we might even, Katty, like send out an email to people if they would like to do another session with Amy outside of the Lunch and Learn thing. And given that she's offered that, we could sort of put it out as a survey to all the people that are on the link, maybe as a follow-up from today, that obviously they're going to be slides that people can go and listen to, and maybe something to do with that would be great. Yeah. Yeah, Lindsay, new therapist. Yeah, I agree, Lindsay. Yeah, freezing and floating. I mean, I think freezing and floating is certainly, it's something that just as a typically developing middle-aged to slightly geriatric person now, I reflect on my own life about, you know, is it a time to be just pausing where I am? You know, loads of things are going on. You know, like we think about that for ourselves when life gets busy. Just hold, see where you are. Are you focusing, you know, putting your energy in the right direction? Why would we not be encouraging that in our partnering with families and children? Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. We'll stop the recording now.